Hi everyone. In Sidelights on Christian Doctrine by James Orr, he's taken up the subject of man's nature. And he makes the point in this segment that man is a compound being. He's created for two worlds. He's the link between two worlds. He says this: there is yet another thing which must be observed about man before passing from this subject of his nature. It follows from the view already given of man as the link between two worlds, the natural and the spiritual, that man is a compound being. Man is not what we may suppose the angels to be, pure incorporeal spirit. Let me repronounce that: pure incorporeal spirit. He is incorporated spirit, that is, spirit in a body. He is made up, as we say, of soul and body. That's derived, he references Matthew 10:28. And both of these elements enter into the conception of his nature. Both are essential elements of his personality. The Bible usage in regard to these terms is indeed somewhat different from our own. A special interest attaches to the biblical terms soul and spirit. In the Old Testament, soul, nephesh, is the seat of life and personality in man. On the one hand, the animating principle or life of the body, the soul is in the blood, for instance, Leviticus 17 verse 11, and source of the animal appetites, desires and passions. On the other, the source of the higher rational and spiritual activities, those which belong to man as a personal, moral and religious being. It is these latter activities which, in Bible phraseology, are specially denominated spirit, that is, ruach. The soul, in other words, is the source of two classes of activities: the animal, connected with the body, and the spiritual, in which lies man's proper affinity to God. It is the presence of the soul in the body which constitutes it flesh. One result follows of great importance for the biblical doctrine of man. Soul, in the Bible, always has the implication of a body. There may be spirits which have no bodies, but they are not souls. On the other hand, souls, as having a spiritual nature, can properly, when disembodied, be called spirits. The spirits in prison, for instance, in 1 Peter 3:19, are spirits or souls of men. These, then, are the two essential parts of man's compound nature, soul and body, and God never intended them to be separated. This sheds an important light on the biblical idea of death. It is not uncommon to hear death spoken of as a universal law of nature. No difficulty need be raised on this point as regards the animals. The animal has its life here and nowhere else. Death is its natural fate. But it is different with man. Man is a spiritual being, and God never meant that the body and soul of man, these two constituent elements in his personality, should be rent asunder. In the biblical point of view, therefore, death is not natural to men. It is something that has come in, a disruption, a tearing asunder, a separation of parts of his being that God never meant to be separated. The Bible has no sympathy with that ultra-spirituality which looks on the body as the prison house of the soul, to be got rid of as soon as possible, and which places man's hope in the immortality of the soul alone. It nowhere regards the disembodied state as a state of full and perfect life. It is in the Old Testament a state of gloom, and the prayer of the saint is to be delivered from it. God will redeem my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me. That's Psalm 49, verse 15. Also, you might reference Psalm 16, verse 10. Even in the New Testament, it is a state of imperfect existence, waiting for our adoption, Paul says, to wit, the redemption of our body. That's Romans 8, verse 23. The redemption of the gospel is not a redemption of the soul only, but the redemption of the whole man, body and soul together. Why then, it will naturally be asked, if death is the contradiction of the true idea of man, is death present in the world at all? At this point, a very vital question arises which may form the transition from the doctrine of man to the doctrine of sin. It is the question of the conception we are to form of man's original condition. I have spoken of the image of God in man as exhibited in his essential constitution, rational, moral, spiritual. But is this the whole? Does the possession of the image of God by man imply simply that the possession of these moral and spiritual capacities? Or does it imply also actual moral resemblance to God? Does it imply not only the elements of a rational and moral nature, but a state of actual harmony of the affections and will, a purity of nature, an uprightness of will, which made sinless obedience possible? The state supposed would be an elementary one, no doubt, but was man as created by God a pure being? It seems to me that, reasoning on general grounds, we should unhesitatingly say yes. For what kind of image of God would that be in which everything was originally blurred, everything distorted and disfigured? This also, it seems plain to me, is implied in the story of man's creation, of Eden, of man's fall. It is the fact, I am convinced, that underlies the whole Bible idea of sin. It is the idea expressed also in many parts of Scripture. God made man upright, according to Ecclesiastes 7, verse 29. Through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin. That, of course, Romans 5, verse 12. So next time we're going to discuss the fall. How does evolution and the fall, how do these two concepts become reconciled? And I'm going to put some links on to a follow-up to some of the ideas that Orr has proposed here as the correct doctrine of Scripture, the ideas of Sheol and Hades and Gehenna. So some references on your screen to what William Vine, the great Brethren scholar, had to say about these things in his famous reference tool, which, by the way, the Watchtower uses quite a bit. The dictionary of Greek and Hebrew terms that is still in print, by the way, some 100 years after Vine designed it. So on your screen right now, those links to the biblical doctrines of Hades and Gehenna, according to William Vine. And next time, how do evolution and the fall, how do these two notions get reconciled?